At the beginning of human civilization, people would trade with each other through like a barter system. So I would trade you my eggs in exchange for the apples you grow. Well, the problem quickly arises where, let's say, you don't want my eggs because you already have producing hens of your own. So a universal currency was needed to facilitate trades for goods and services. Now, all kinds of different things were tried out, everything from rocks to seashells and even bird feathers. Each of those mostly had some kind of issue that prevented their usefulness, though. Like rocks are just too abundant. Anybody can just go find them anywhere. So we needed something that was a little bit more rare. Um, the bird feathers wouldn't work because as soon as they got wet, they would get destroyed. And it's the same reason why food crops wouldn't work because over time they go bad. And then there was other things that just wouldn't work out because they weren't divisible into smaller units. Like let's say livestock, because chopping up a horse into 10 equal parts doesn't really work so well. Um, so over thousands of years of trial and error, all the different cultures all around the world, independently of each other, all came to the same decision that the very best currency that worked was precious metals. So if you fast forward to the founding of the U.S., and I'm going to discuss the U.S. because that's where I live and most of my viewers do, but if you live in other countries, it's the same general principles apply. At the time of the founding, most of the world's major powers were under a silver standard. Great Britain, China, India, all of them within the country, the people used silver to trade with each other. And then gold was used um, to settle trade between nations in larger amounts. So the founding fathers of the U.S., when they wrote the Constitution, wrote into it that there would be a bimetallic standard. And it's actually pretty interesting because so many of the people I talk to are consider themselves to be pro-Constitution. They really like what the Constitution stands for. You know, their freedom of speech and freedom to own firearms and such. But I never hear any of these people mention their right to gold and silver as a currency. You see, when the founders were writing the Constitution, they were not. The purpose of the Constitution is not to give you the citizen rights, because those rights are natural rights which are given to you, endowed by your Creator. They can't be given by a government. So actually, the purpose of the Constitution is to limit what the government is capable of doing. And the founders saw that there was a need for stable measurements in the currency. Just like if you're building a house, if today a foot is 12 inches long, but tomorrow it's 13 inches long, and the next day it's 11 and 5/16, you're not going to build a very strong house, are you? And it's the same way. They saw that in order to have a healthy financial system, there needed to be a stable currency in place, and that's what gold and silver provide. So it's written into there in Article 1, Section 10, right there, that the government cannot mint anything but gold and silver as a currency. So the fiat currency we have currently is completely unconstitutional. And for all those of you who believe in the sanctity of the Constitution, this is another right you should be fighting for, because you are entitled to that proper currency. So we started off with a bimetallic standard where the majority of trade happening between people within the country was with silver. That was the standard of the people. Okay, so for smaller subdivisions, you had copper. So like our eggs and apple trade example, you would use copper for something small like that. If you're buying something larger from a merchant, like say a milk cow or something, you would use silver. and then the gold would be used as a trade settlement between nations. As that worked out great. There was no inflation during the course of the 1800s while that was in place. In fact, there was actually deflation. If you can imagine that, over the course of 100 years, prices actually went down. And that happens naturally because of innovations in technology, improvements to the transportation and things like that. So it brought prices of goods down as they can be brought to people more easier. And that's the way it should be. It's the natural way for prices to go down. But then in 1873, there was a Coinage Act passed, okay, where they wanted to start weaning off of silver and move towards a gold standard. Now, the reason for that is because when the people hold the currency of the realm in their hands, in this case silver, then the people have the power. Now, the people in charge, the bankers and the politicians and that, they had the gold. So they wanted their gold they held to be the primary currency of the realm. So that Coinage Act of 1873, a lot of us refer to it lovingly as a crime of 73, because it took the power away from the people in their currency, silver, and started moving it to the more powerful people, increasing their power with the gold standard. So actually, if you're familiar with The Wizard of Oz, that was actually a parable of the crime of 73. So in it, the yellow brick road represented the gold standard, which then led to Oz, which was a representation of Washington, D.C., where the people in charge were complete frauds and there was nothing behind the curtain. So how did Dorothy get back to the normalcy in just a normal life? Well, in the movie, she had ruby slippers, but actually in the book, she had silver slippers. So in order to go back to a sense of normalcy, all she had to do was click her silver slippers together to then go back and away from the gold standard. And there is actually characters in it, like the Cowardly Lion, which actually represented real political persons of the time. And it's real fascinating. You can go look into it deeper if you wanted to learn more about it. But that's basically was to move us from a silver standard then to a gold standard. Okay? So that worked and that was completed. And then in the year 1900, we were completely off of the silver standard. So 31 years later, we were then taken off the gold standard by FDR, because it wasn't enough for the bankers and politicians to have the gold be their currency of the realm. They wanted even more power than that. So they made it illegal for you to be able to transfer your dollars into precious metals. Because previously, when we were on the silver standard, the paper money you received actually at the top said silver certificate. So you can, if somebody gave you a silver certificate, you can go to any bank and exchange it for an actual silver dollar. And then it was the same way once we went on the gold standard. You can take it was $20 for an ounce of silver, for an ounce of gold. So you can turn in a $20 bill and you can actually get 1 ounce of gold in return. So they changed the rules in the early 1930s so that you can no longer transfer that paper into gold. You just had to trust that the government's value of that dollar was worthwhile. But then countries would still trade in gold because other countries were saying, yeah, we're not going to give you our goods in exchange for your fake monopoly money, but you can go ahead and send us that gold. We'll take that. But then it got to a point in 1971 where actually Nixon completely took us off the gold standard because we defaulted on our debts. We could no longer, all the debts we had to other countries from trade, we no longer had enough gold left to give to them. So instead we told them, yeah, we're not going to give you gold anymore. We're just, what debts we owe you, we're just going to print up all this paper dollars and give that to you instead. Because simultaneously, Kissinger had been working in Saudi Arabia. He was making deals with the Sauds to exchange their oil, sell it to the rest of the world for US dollars only. So instead of being on a gold standard, we then quickly transferred into an oil standard where the dollar was backed by the oil in the Saudi Arabian oil fields. Because they were only selling with US dollars, it forced all the other countries that wanted oil from the Saudis to stockpile US dollars so then they can then get the oil. So that oil standard had been working since the early 70s up until just recently. Now you're getting to a point where you're seeing all these other countries are not wanting to trade in US dollars anymore, and they're moving away to other currencies. And that's a problem for the US. Think of back in Iraq, Saddam Hussein, he actually wanted to sell his oil for euros, is what he wanted at the time when the euro was still a little bit stronger than it was now. And the US did not like him selling for euros. So they made up the lie that he was holding on to weapons of mass destruction and use as an excuse to go in and kill him, then put in their own puppet government, which would only sell the oil for US dollars. Same thing with Gaddafi in Libya. He wanted to sell his oil for gold. He didn't believe the US dollar was strong anymore, wanted gold in exchange. So again, the US went over there and murdered him and put in their own puppet government that would settle the trade in US dollars. So I think I'm going to end the video here as a part one, because as these videos get too long, I'm not able to edit and upload them. So I think what I'll do is just divide it into two parts, and then the next one I'll explain what this little history lesson means for our inflation situation currently and what it's going to mean for us into the future. So as I'm able to get that uploaded, I will put a link to it in the description below this video. So you can just go from watching this to watching that. And also, if you're interested in these type of discussions, I make it real easy for you to find. Just go below the video, click on my channel name, The Backwoods Hermit, and on that page there will be a tab that says playlists. And I have all my videos organized into different subjects there. So this one I'll put in the playlist titled Truth Bombs. So other videos where I discuss, I like to kind of talk about all the lies we've been told and kind of debunk them. So that's the playlist for that. And a playlist for other things as well. So check that stuff out. Now I'll see you in the part two when I get it up.